Next In.
Steve, I'm Wes, and I want to welcome you to Next In. Thank you for being on the podcast. Just so you know, this is the first podcast I've ever done.
Great.
So I hear that you're a podcast veteran.
I've got one.
Yeah. Well, that's double what I have.
Yeah.
Maybe not to give you too much encouragement, but I think my mom will at least watch this. She does love me. So that's
good.
one listener right there.
That's good.
Steve, if you want, man, I know it's just me and you, and this can be a little bit weird, but people will be listening to this. Can you just introduce yourself really quick? And then I just plan to have kind of an open forum conversation with you, man.
Sure. Yeah. My name is Steve Picciano. I'm a VP of Engineering at FineTune. I've been in the technology software field now for about 30 years in a variety of different roles. Worked my way up through as a developer, and then team lead, architect, and more recently a VP of Engineering. But always really stayed on the cutting edge. So I've been fortunate that I've been able to do a lot and play around with a lot of exciting technologies.
Yeah. I think if I remember right, and I don't have it in front of me, so if I'm butchering this, let me know. But I believe you started Oracle was about the start of your career. Is that right?
It goes back a little bit before that too. Yeah. I really came out of college developing embedded software for a company, a really small company, a startup that was doing some government projects, some very interesting government projects, and found that was really interesting work. But I liked more of the fast pace of developing business applications, and I really liked getting involved with users and customers and understanding how software was used in the business setting. So I quickly transitioned to software consultant, worked at a small public company called Easel, and then from there started a consulting company with a few friends, doing object-oriented development and small talk development. And then it wasn't until a few years later that I landed at Oracle, and I landed in a data warehouse consulting group there, building out decision support systems and analytic systems for some pretty big customers.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. That's awesome. I got a little distracted in the early days of your resume because I believe I picked up the fact that you were a football player at MSU. Is that correct?
I was. Yeah, that's not. We talked about having an abnormal background. That's definitely one for sure.
No, that's awesome. I thought about saying I saw where you were a football player at U of M. Just to see how that went over.
Yeah, that wouldn't have gone over well. Yeah.
So, man, what position did you play? I'd love to know about this.
Yeah, so I arrived there as a receiver. Was about 190-pound receiver. Was pretty good size back then for a receiver. And then after a couple of years, switched to defense and went strong safety, and was a little bit undersized as a strong safety, and that's when the injuries started piling up after that. So you don't want to be an undersized anything in college football.
No.
But yeah, being a receiver at a Big Ten school back in the 80s meant you didn't get the ball very much, and you didn't get on the field very much either. So
it's still impressive, man. I was not a Division I anything, so I'm a college dropout. So I mean, that's impressive.
Yeah.
The COO of our company played at the University of Wisconsin.
So Big Ten guy. Yeah.
Nice. So there's another non-traditional background for you.
Yep.
I joke with him that the Big Ten isn't real football. You have to actually step into the SEC.
Right.
He really appreciates that joke.
Yeah.
You can imagine.
Yeah.
So, man, so football player, left football, went right into technology. Mm-hmm. And then you've seen everything from Oracle to, I believe you're at a startup now, right? FineTune.
I am. Yeah. I've worked at a lot of startups along the way. I found that I could really, for me, my career, I've always wanted to make a difference. You know, I didn't want to be just the guy at a big company sitting in a cubicle watching the clock. You know, I wanted to make sure that when you come to work every day, you want to give it your all. You want to try hard, and you want to know that you're making a difference. And I found that startups, it's a lot easier to do that at a startup. And moving the needle or whatever, whatever other analogy you might hear,
Right.
uh, I've had a lot more satisfaction, and you see things happen faster. You tend to work on projects that are shorter, that you can see that you've made a difference, and you've gotten software to a customer faster. You've been able to interact with that customer, get feedback, and iterate on it.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I've always preferred startups. Although you mentioned Oracle, I worked at Oracle in a smaller group within Oracle. We weren't part of the big mothership out west. We
Right.
were in the Boston area, so we had our almost like our own little company, and it was building out a new group focused on data warehousing using some of Oracle's brand new products that they had too. So we were very much like a startup, even though it was at at Oracle.
Yeah, and I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but at that time, data warehousing was that was the hottest thing, right?
It
I
was
mean, that
still
was
brand new, yeah. In fact, Oracle 8i had just come out. I think it might even have been beta, and we were using some of the modules or features of it at some pretty big customers, some
yeah,
pharmaceutical customers, some aerospace customers, building out data marts and large data warehouses. Yeah.
dude, that's awesome, man. So you really have effectively managed over the course of your career to stay right at the edge of technology, right?
Yeah, that's been a goal of mine, not to get bored. That's a goal of
Yeah.
mine. So, I always say if your job isn't challenging and it's not exciting, then it's probably time for a new job,
Well,
or
correct, and
something different.
I'm convinced that that's how whatever your profession is, whether you're a tech recruiter or an engineering leader or a product leader, whatever that may be, that is how we die intellectually.
Yeah, for
You
sure.
go into an environment where it's like, "Hey, I figured this out," and you're not intellectually stimulated, you're not learning, you're not growing, and you can kind of hold the line, do the status quo, keep people happy, go home at the end of the day, and you don't have to think about it, you turn it off,
Yeah,
right?
exactly, exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah, and that's true for yeah, engineering and tech and non-tech and football for that matter too.
yeah.
So if it gets too easy, you might want to find a different league to play in.
Yeah, so that leads me to my next question. Me personally, like I was a very average athlete. Although
Mhm,
if you'd asked me around 17 or 18, I thought I was a lot better than I was. But I was a very, very average, like high
mhm.
school athlete. But my dad actually coached me in basketball, and his rule, I played a ton of pickup, ton of travel AAU, and he said, "Hey, I don't care how much pickup you play. I want you to go do it."
Yep.
But if the rec center in our town had 3 courts, he said, and those courts kind of separated themselves out based on skill.
Mhm.
And he said, don't go play on the court where you know you can play. He
Yeah,
said, go to the court where you think you're going to be way outmatched and you play on that court. He said, that's the only way I'm going to let you go to the rec center. And that stuck with me, man. So for you,
right.
what's your philosophy of professional growth in terms of thinking along those ideas?
Yeah, it's very, very similar to that actually. And yes, a few people asked me the same question, like, why did you go to Michigan State when they had all Americans there, and you knew you weren't going to get to play, you weren't going to be a starter. You could have gone to a Division III school. There were some schools in the Buffalo area where I grew up that were, you know, telling me I'd, start as a freshman, things like that. And I thought, well, I want to see, I want to put myself up against the best. I want to see how I do against these All Americans, and I want to see, uh, if I can compete at that level. And it does force you to step up your game as well.
Yeah,
In technology, yeah, that's the same thing. There's always new products coming out, always new technologies coming out. And what's new right now isn't going to be new in 2 years from now. There's going to be a new language.
right,
There's going to be new architectures. Cloud's going to be around for a while, but the way you use the cloud, serverless, for example, serverless wasn't really much of a thing 5 years ago,
right.
and now it is. And so in engineering, you have to continually learn and continually challenge yourself to understand more, understand these new concepts, and kind of grow with it and figure out. But in the end, for me, it's all about what you produce with it. I
Yeah,
had a manager many years ago. I was developing small talk and object-oriented development before a lot of people knew what it was. And I was a beta tester for Java before Java even came out. And I
that's
had a
awesome.
manager that once said to me, like, the end user, the business user who's using your application, they don't care how cool the technology was behind it.
Right.
They just want it to work, and they want it to work well. And I've always kept that in mind. So as I've adopted new technology, the shiny new stuff, the fastest data engines, and all that kind of stuff. Um, I've made sure that it's got a practical use and that it's solving a real problem, as opposed to just, "Well, let's go learn something just for the sake of learning it, and then, maybe
Yeah.
use it if we want to." But yeah, so I've tried to not only guide my career by that, but also mentor others as well to follow those same principles.
Yeah, so that kind of leads me to another question. So if you and I aren't growing in our professions intellectually, if we're not intellectually stimulated, it sounds like we're similar in that regard. Is like I get bored.
Hmm.
I'll just tell you, I won't out the company.
Right.
You can read my LinkedIn. But
Sure.
my last role before I came to Next Level paid me really well. They
Hmm.
treated me really great.
Yep.
It was good, but about 12 months in, I figured it out. I knew how to be like kind of top of the pack because
Hmm.
they rank recruiters in every organization I've ever been in.
Sure.
And I could put in, and this is embarrassing to say out loud, but I could put in about 20 hours a week and get about twice the result. And so I'd love to tell you I put in like 50 hours a week, but
Yeah.
no, I put in the 20.
Mm.
And then that was cool for like 30 seconds. And then I was like, man, I am losing a step intellectually. And
Right.
so I stepped into tech recruiting. But if that's true for us as individuals, right, as professionals, you either grow or die,
Yep.
right? Let's just put it bluntly. You either grow or die. If that's true for us, that's also true for organizations. So you talk
Hmm.
about technology gets outdated in like
Yep.
30 seconds.
Right.
So for you as a tech leader, how do you keep your organization from getting outdated, from getting outcompeted? I think the tech space is the singular most competitive space in the entire US economy, in the world
Hmm.
economy. And so how do you kind of foresee what's coming down the pipe and keep your engineering teams on that bleeding edge?
Yeah. So that's a great question. It is. It's challenging, especially when you've got product roadmaps and you've got to hit deliverables and things of that nature. But I always look for ways to plan in what I call architectural evolution or tech investments. How do you make some changes, small changes that are incremental and continual, and adopt not in a big bang manner, but adopt changes and change your direction on the fly. And I've been doing that a while now for the last 5 to 10 years. I've been able to do that successfully, and that's important. It's not just important to keep your code base and your architecture up to date, but it helps with recruiting. It's really hard to hire people if you're not working with the latest and greatest
Right.
tools. Because if you think about the conversation we just had about somebody getting bored, right? You're going to get bored if you've been working with the same language, same technology. Maybe the product's different, or it's evolving, but you're not learning anything technically new. So you're going to leave and you're going to go look at another company, but you're not going to go to a company that is also behind the curve
Right.
on technology. So you want to go to a company where there's something in it for you, not just a paycheck, right? And so that's where it's really a great recruiting tool as well, not just for your developers who are there to make sure they're growing, but also to make sure you can hire people too as you grow or have to replace people.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely, man. I think I think we as an agency will eventually get some hard data on this because it would be beneficial to us and to our clients. But if I could, me personally, I've probably talked to in the last 6 months, I've probably talked to 400 or 500 engineering leaders. So that kind of senior manager level, all the way to we're recruiting on a CTO role. And the thing that I get most often, the two most common denominators is I want impact, which is what you've said, and I want to be challenged. I want impact. I want to be challenged.
Right.
It's rarely ever, hey man, I'm looking for a big pay bump. I
Right.
mean, that
Right.
matters at some point. That matters, right?
Yep.
We'd
Yep.
be naive if it didn't. But it is impact and challenge, impact, and it's a coin toss as to which one I get on the phone.
Hmm.
But man, it sounds like I think there's something too about an engineering brain that wants that. Like,
Hmm.
I don't think you really become an engineer. I mean, you become an engineer because you want to solve problems. I mean, would you agree?
Oh, that's exactly it. Yeah, you have to have it in your blood. You when you come out with your degree, and I do some mentoring at one of my um, alma maters locally here, and I mentor some students. And the thing I tell them is that what you've learned in college, you're not going to use in your first job or your second job. They don't teach you enough
Right.
that you're going to just go and do what you did in one of your courses. But what they're teaching you in college is how to learn, because that's
Yeah.
the most important thing. It's you're going to be continually learning, and that's really what companies are looking for from someone. Is not, do you know Python now? Do you know the ins and outs of an Oracle database? They want to know, are you capable of learning those things, and are you capable of learning the next technology we adopt? And that's important in that continual learning is really important in project management, and being able to deliver software, because you can create the best plan in the world, and you can figure out what are all your risks in that plan. But if you start to adopt technologies that your developers and your development teams are struggling to learn, that's going to set you back. That's going to set
Right.
back your schedule. It may even make some of the features impossible to implement, because you chose the wrong technologies, or you picked maybe a open source framework that it just isn't quite ready yet, and people don't know how to use it.
Yeah. When I was in the military, I mean, you've seen, I was a grunt. I served on sniper teams mostly, and it wasn't a joke, but you always had a plan and a contingency, right?
Hmm.
Anytime you were
Right.
going to go out on an operation,
Right.
and we would joke, we would get our brief, and then we would hear the plan, like, hey, this is the objective, this is what we're going to go do, and then after it's over, it's like, so just forget about that. Plan to
Yep.
use Plan B.
Yep. Exactly. Yeah, you
Yeah.
do, and that's exactly the way I build software, and I recommend other people think about it. Is you think about how you're going to build your software, or any plan really, and then you think about, okay, how is this thing going to fail? Like,
Yeah.
what's going to cause the thing to fail? And if you think about, if there's too many users, if I don't do enough scalability testing, is there a cyber attack? Did I do enough security testing? Did I write enough unit tests? Are we going to have regression issues? So you have to start to think through, essentially attack your own software and figure out
Right.
how is this, you want to pressure test your own plan and say, okay, what could go wrong that could make this fail? And it's funny, I also learned that lesson as well playing football. Is
Yeah.
once the game starts, you can throw the plan out the window, because
That's right.
a lot of things happen in a game. Injuries happen, penalties, fumbles, what have you, and that coaching staff has to be ready with plan B, plan C, plan D, because it's really a series of a lot of little plans that change or morph throughout the game.
Yeah.
And software development is very similar to that, actually. There's a lot that goes wrong, actually, in most software development projects, and you have to make a lot of little decisions and corrections along the way to bring it back to a point where you can actually release something of value.
Right. Yeah, that makes me think. This makes me think of I don't know how professional this quote is for this kind of a platform, but Mike Tyson was being interviewed one time, and uh and he's something, I can't remember what the reporter asked him, but he goes, everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face.
That is true.
It's true.
Yep, that is
It's true.
true.
It turns
Yeah.
out like your opponent has a say, right?
Yep,
Right.
that's right. Yeah,
And
yeah.
so, man, that's awesome. It sounds like I think you and I are really aligned on how we think through those things. So, would you say that as an engineer, being able to adapt and not become dejected and down when that does happen is kind of honestly a prerequisite to being an engineer? How do you look for that in engineers that you hire for your teams? Like, is that
It
something you
is,
try to
yeah.
see? Like,
You do, yeah, you do. You look at some of those soft skills, I call them. I always ask people what their greatest accomplishment was, but a lot of times I'll ask them what their biggest failure was or what
right,
didn't they solve. And honestly, if you were to interview me for a job, some of my most important learning happened in the failures. Not that I had a lot of failures, but it was the startup that didn't take off, and we had to close the doors.
right,
It wasn't the acquisitions; it was, it was the successes that weren't quite at the level that we expected or wanted. And you learn a lot from failure. And I'll ask developers how they handle failure. Ask them maybe about a problem that they were so challenged by that they couldn't solve, because I want to see how they handle that. Because there's going to be times where the schedule is tight. There's pressure to deliver something, and maybe that sure thing new technology we thought that was going to solve all of our problems doesn't really work. So now what do we do, and how do
right.
we address that? And that's bound to happen, especially in today's world with open source and uh, you know people grabbing code from wherever they can get it to you know
Right.
to build something new. Yeah, and so that is important. It's also, really, teamwork is important as much as we're in a distributed environment. I like to see if people are comfortable collaborating and people know when to reach out for help. And I found
Yeah.
that a project success really comes down to that, where, if you build a good team, a team that performs well, you have people that are really good at collaborating within the team.
Yeah. One of the common denominators when I talk to engineering leaders, especially at your level, when they come into a new organization, is the teamwork environment, and not so much on the engineering team, but I can't tell you how many organizational leaders I talk to on a weekly basis that are bemoaning the fact that there's a silo here for engineering and there's a silo here for product, and there's this massive gap in the middle. So,
Hmm.
like for you, like is that one of the things that you've tried to really have well integrated? And if so, like how have you done that as a leader?
I do, yeah. I think it's important, especially a lot of the products and applications that I've worked on are highly technical in nature. So, they're the type where the product owners or product managers really need to understand the technology or the technical problem that it's solving.
Right,
And at the same time, it's really important for the developers to understand the business or understand how the software is being used. And so there needs to be that collaboration across product and engineering. But that I like to be the bridge when they can't figure it out,
right,
because and I certainly I can empathize with the business side. And that's the piece I love the most, especially about a startup, is getting involved in the product side of it, not just how to build the software and what to build it with, but what problem is it solving?
right,
Empathizing with the user, understanding what some of their challenges are, and then helping to be that person that kind of translates the language, product language to engineering and vice
right.
versa. And I like the product owners and the product managers to understand the technical challenges with some of the things we have. That being said, there's different kinds of challenges. There's technical challenges, there's staffing challenges, schedule challenges, and whatnot. But making sure that they're the kind of challenges that I can relay to product that they can understand and also empathize with on our side,
Yeah,
um, as opposed to like, well, we picked the wrong tool to build this with, and that's going to set us back several quarters now. That's
right,
not a good mistake to make. So, I'd like to be able to articulate what the plan B is along with that, or how are we, if this doesn't work, how are we going to solve the problem? Kind of go in with, as you mentioned earlier, go in expecting to have to use plan B.
yeah,
And I make sure that they're aware of that too. That
right. Yeah. When we're recruiting, if I have a principal engineering role, I have a principal engineer that's interviewing and he's close to offer stage or she. I have three more ready because
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
just going to assume that the first one I send in
Oh,
is either not
sure.
going to get the offer or they're not going to accept the offer, and so we just have someone else,
Right. Right.
right?
Exactly.
Um, so thinking along, I like this conversation because one of the things I'm personally interested in is people overcoming adversity, whether it's professional adversity, relational adversity, or maybe you just have fitness goals. But like, I love learning from people who are in disciplines I'm not even in.
Mhm.
Like, what is the thought process by overcoming that? So for you, in engineering specifically, because that's why we're on to today. What's the biggest challenge you've ever had? Whether it's maybe a people challenge, it's a technical challenge, maybe a mixture of both throughout your career. You look back on, you'd be like, those were some hard days, but we came through it. I'm glad we did. I'm thankful for that experience.
Mm, yeah, that's a great question. I get asked that a lot actually, and there's a lot of them, and they're all different types. So they're all challenges for different reasons. And as you mentioned, there's technical challenges. Like when I was at Teradata and we're trying to build a business out of an open source product called Presto. And we're trying to bring that to market. We're trying to make it commercial ready, enterprise ready. Also at Teradata, we were the first group to really introduce the concept of ARR to Teradata.
Yeah,
We were introducing Agile to some of the other organizations in Teradata. Um, that was hard from we were kind of like the tail wagging the dog a little bit there.
right,
So it felt like you really had an uphill battle to fight, trying to explain how we needed to do business. There's also been some challenges in the past with replatforming, where you have a successful product that has a pretty big customer base, and now you need to, the architecture just completely needs to be replatformed, and it's hard to do that. It's hard to sell the business on getting the money and the time to go do that, and
right,
educating on like why you need to do it from a not just a tech perspective but a business perspective is challenging. And then people is always hard. Honestly,
right.
people is always hard. Every team's different. There's the dynamics of a team. In the last 2 years with the pandemic and some of the stressors that the pandemic has put on individuals, um, managing people and their well-being is always
Sure.
something challenging, and it's really something too that I take to heart. Because again, you can't build software without the people, and
Right.
you need good people. You need people that know what they're doing, that take their job and their responsibility seriously. And I really do like to make sure that I'm doing my part to help them advance their career. So I really look for ways, to enable them to further their career as well. So
Yeah. So
uh,
what is when you think about that? So career advancement, you're a leader. When you're looking at that mid-level engineer and they want to up level and they want to grow, what is kind of your philosophy in terms of the course you chart for them? I would assume, and I hope I assume correctly. I would assume that you're probably a pretty avid reader. Would that be
I do, yeah. I
fair?
read a bit leadership books, but also
Yeah,
some occasional fiction and
yeah.
nonfiction and whatnot. Yeah.
So does that bleed at all into up leveling your people, or what does that look like? What does that process look like for
Yeah,
you?
I think it depends on the request that I get, and a lot of it I like. Again, I like to use the word empower. Is I try to empower them to uh, take their career in the direction they want to go, and I will identify a path they can take it down.
Yeah,
So if it's learning a new technology, many times it's about taking on more responsibility. So it's I want to work on more complex software. I want to be an epic owner. I want to take on. I want to interact with the product managers more often. I want to talk to customers. Things of that nature. I figure out what some of those tasks are that they can start to do and start to show that they're capable of, that's going to get them to the next level.
yeah,
um, I try to make sure that they have a good path to succeed. So I start them with something small and kind of grow from there, see how it goes from there. So in the case of somebody who says, hey, my goal is to be an architect or a CTO someday, some of that's going to start with, let's give them some small design work, see how they do with that. And
Right.
then let's talk through their thought process on how they solve that problem. And then let's give them a bigger assignment and a bigger assignment until it gets, more, they're doing more architect type level work. So,
Nice.
so finding like the piecemeal accomplishments where they can start to demonstrate they have the ability to go down that path. And sometimes they don't. Sometimes they realize they don't really want that either.
Right.
So,
Right.
they don't know till they get there. People who want to become a team lead, there's ways to rotate them into a lead role where maybe they're leading on a given epic or a given feature, where they may be just leading one or two other people, but they have some of the responsibilities that go along with being a lead, and being able to give them a chance of trying it out and seeing if it's something they really want to do.
Nice. So I got to circle back to the reading because
Sure.
I love reading. So you said you also read fiction. So if you're going to recommend one book for professional development and one book for entertainment, what are we recommending?
Oh, I just finished one recently for that I really enjoyed, and it's called the name escapes me, and I should remember that. It's
It
funny
was
that
really impactful. It sounded.
no, the reason the name, I have to admit, I just got recovered from COVID, so
Oh,
my brain's a little bit off, but it's about an elephant that never forgets, that they remember everything, and it was on the bestseller list. I wish I could remember the name of it, but uh, it's something about, the memory of an elephant. It's called,
okay.
and it's not a very long book, and it reads almost like it's a true story, but I don't think it is. And it is. It's just an amazing story, and I love animals, and I love elephants in particular.
Yeah.
And I've got a little collection of wooden elephants that story. Years ago, I had a bunch of developers working on my team when I was at Oracle, and a couple of them were from India, and they went back to India to visit their family, and they brought me back a gift, which was a wood carved elephant. And so I
That's
really
cool.
really liked it. Yes, I put it on my mantle at home, and I told a few others about it. And then every time somebody went back to India, they brought me an elephant. So,
Yeah.
so now
That's
I've got
awesome.
about 8 of them, 8 or 9 of them,
That's
maybe.
awesome.
Yeah, all made of all different types of wood. And anyways, this book is it's a quick read, and I have to admit it's very emotional too. If you
Okay.
have, I think I think you'd love it.
Yeah, I'll check it out.
Yeah, it's about an elephant from Africa, and who lives to be an old age, but talks about all the different families that he met when he was there, and that's certainly one of my new favorite books.
Nice.
Yeah, and as far as like leadership or tech books, a lot of it I love reading blogs, and really just love reading some stories online. The leadership books that I tend to read are not the how-to books.
Right.
They're a little bit different. They're more of the style of book where you're maybe learning a skill, like maybe a skill or an attribute, something about empathy, for example,
Nice.
or understanding behavioral patterns of somebody. I read one book recently, not too long ago, called Quiet. And essentially it was about learning about introverts and how
Yeah.
to interact with introverts. And of course, engineering, there's a lot of introverts in engineering. So,
Yes.
it's those style of books, not so much the, how do you manage this impossible project, or how do you grow a team from 20 to 50, something
Right.
like that.
Man,
Not those type of books.
I can tell you on that, the introvert extrovert front, right? So you've probably gathered that I'm a fairly extreme extrovert.
Yeah.
My wife, though, is very introverted,
Hmm.
and she is one of three girls. Both of her sisters and her dad are engineers.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So we've been married almost 12 years, and I was a shock to the system. We'll put it that way when
Yeah. I
we
bet.
met. Yeah. So just like I said all this to say, just like in my personal life, I've learned how to talk to introverted people
Yep.
because the love of my life is an introverted person.
Sure. Yep.
So
Yep.
the first time, so before I was in tech recruiting, I was in sales recruiting, and you're just an extrovert talking to other extroverts, and that's kind of a
Hmm.
conversation of like
Sure.
who can be the loudest and get the other person to be quiet and listen for 5 seconds, right? But my first interview ever that I conducted when I moved over to tech recruiting was with an engineer. He was very technically proficient, but we're on a Google Hangout, very much like this, and I'm talking to him. I'm asking him questions, and the whole time he's got the camera on him, but he's like this, and just would not look at the cameraman. And I was like,
Yep.
okay, like there's got to be a better way. I'm thankful to say, like, that's not the norm. I think engineers get stereotyped wrongly sometimes, right? That's
Hmm.
not the norm.
Sure. Right.
But I was like, there's
Right.
got to be a better way. So one of the things I found is if I'm interviewing an engineer, whether it's a senior engineer, principal engineer, unless it's a people leader, because what I found is like the people side of engineering, that's typically if you did have to overcome that, you've overcame it because now you're
Yep.
leading people. And I'll do something like this.
True.
But if I've never met you before and you're an IC, we're not going to do a Google Hangout, man. We're
Hmm.
just going to do a phone call, right?
Hmm.
Because I found that people are more comfortable. They're less defensive. If you want to get up and get a cup of coffee when we're talking about the role, you can get up and get a cup of coffee.
Hmm.
And people just kind of tend to let their guard down. And I have better conversations that way. So for you at FineTune, is everyone fully remote? So is it all kind of Zoom and Google Hangout?
We
How do you
are.
handle that in a remote
Yeah, yeah,
role?
we don't have an office right now. We are fully remote. We about 65 people total. We're spread out over 14 different countries, maybe more now, maybe 15. There's some pockets,
Wow.
so we do have like a small contingent down in Brazil, but not all in the same city. Same thing in Romania. And then, we've got people in Africa and Egypt and
Right.
uh, Spain, Argentina, Bolivia, Philippines,
That's awesome.
Canada. Yeah, so all over the place.
That is awesome.
So yeah, it's a lot of collaboration. We use Zoom a lot. We use Slack. It is. It's a challenge, and the one thing I found is that you really have to over communicate. You can't assume that somebody heard a message the first time. You have to uh, put it in a couple different Slack channels. You have to say it at an Agile stand up ceremony.
Right.
You have to kind of get the word out and make sure people, for the important stuff, people see it and hear it. So both forms. And you do spend a lot of time on. I do spend a lot of time with one-on-ones. I like to talk to people
Right.
individually. I find that I've worked remotely before in the sense that I've always worked at companies that had flexible policies around, even when we had an office, you could work from home a day or two if you needed to. We had last company I was at, we had work from home Fridays. The thing I found was that you actually were at a disadvantage if you were not the one in the room. So
Right.
if you're in a meeting of like 8 people, let's say
Yes.
your development team is 8, and let's say 2 people didn't come into work that day and they just called in, even with Zoom and the proper cameras and the proper microphones, you tend to be not heard. I found that your
Right.
opinion was not heard, or if it was, it just, you weren't part of the conversation. And there were times when I was planning to work from home and maybe an important management meeting or leadership meeting came up. I would change my mind and get on the train and go into Boston and go to work
Yeah.
because I'm like, for this meeting, I want to be in the room. I don't want to be remote for that meeting.
Yeah.
So I did find that with everybody remote, it levels the playing field a little bit there
For
because
sure.
now everybody's remote. No one's in the room together. But it's a challenge, and it's something that I think we're pretty good at it. But there's obviously, ways of getting better.
How do
There's
you
time.
Oh, sorry,
Yeah.
I didn't mean to cut you off
Yeah,
at
I
all.
was gonna say there's times where I wanna stand up in front of a whiteboard and start scribbling, on a whiteboard because I
Right.
like to do that. So
Nice.
that's a challenge, yeah.
How have you gotten your engineers to engage in a fully remote environment and like build those team relationships that I mean, frankly, are necessary if you want to build good products?
Right. Yeah, it's challenging to do that, but it is, a lot of times it's calling on people, asking them for their opinion, really asking them to get involved in a conversation or a discussion. We use, some collaborate, documents. We have, Google Docs and Quip and a few other things to
Nice.
collaborate on. So we try to, uh, make sure we include people by using the adding them to make sure
Right.
that they're aware that they're being invited to converse. But it is hard. I mean, I think that's regardless of whether you're remote or not, though, I've seen that. Like, you've gone into meetings in a conference room with a team, and, there's always the people that are going to sit around, look at their laptop, never speak during a meeting.
Right.
So you really run into that all the time. And some of that's the introverted nature of it. People are afraid to speak up in a meeting. And then some of that's just, they don't have anything to say. It is, yeah, trying to make sure that the right people are involved in decisions, and trying to make sure that people feel empowered as well to be able to speak up and make sure that their opinion will be heard.
Nice. Nice. Yeah, I can tell you that in our meetings, so I'm hybrid. I'm home. This is at my house, and then 3 days a week I'm in our Nashville office, and I've made 2 of the days that I'm in when we have a weekly stand up on Monday and on Friday, and for exactly what you're saying, because I realize if I'm working from home on Monday, my COO can mute me.
Mm,
I get a little carried away, but if
yeah,
I'm live and in person, I can't be muted.
there you
So.
go. There you go. Yeah.
Well, Steve, I want to be really respectful of your time. You have people to lead and things to build. If you could give that kind of junior to mid-level engineer any word of advice, because hopefully more than my mom watches this, she's not any kind
Yep.
of an engineer.
Sure.
And yeah, if you could give them any parting words of wisdom, because you're at a pretty high level, you've had a phenomenal career. What would you say to that just kind of generic young engineer? I want to grow. I want to do this for the next 25, 30 years. What would you say to them?
Yeah, I would say, develop patterns of continual learning, stay curious, and try to keep up with the curve. And the other thing too, I'd say is, don't get too comfortable. Come to work every day and give your honest best at work. And a lot of the career advancement stuff is the promotions and all that stuff's important, but a lot of that's going to take care of itself. If you just give your best, and uh, you give, um, you're always looking to better yourself as far as learning more. You're gonna be in this career for a long time, and you're gonna be very successful.
Awesome. Awesome. We'll leave it there. Steve, I really enjoyed it. I love growth minded conversations. And I like what you said about developing patterns of continual learning. I think those are patterns you can start to engage in and develop at any point in your career if you haven't started. So I like that.
I agree.
All right, man. I will talk to you
Great.
soon, hopefully.
Sounds
And
great.
I hope it's been enjoyable. I know I've enjoyed it.
Oh yeah, it's a pleasure to meet you, Wes, and really
You as
enjoyed our
well.
conversation.
All right, Steve. Chat soon, man.
Okay.
Next day.